The Iron Way, Rome's most prestigious road, 11 miles of marble and conquest, dawn 71 BCE, you'd expect soldiers, merchants, the rhythm of empire waking up. Instead, there are crosses, 6 alone of them. The smell hits first. Blood fresh enough that the morning dew hasn't washed it away yet. Then the sound, shallow breathing multiplied by thousands. Crowds circling, waiting. A Roman merchant walks past, adjusting his toga, doesn't look up. A mother pulls her child closer to the road's edge, away from the bodies. Not out of horror, out of convenience. Children play near the base of a cross like it's a tree. These aren't criminals hanging here, not traitors. Slaves. Men who dared to dream of freedom, who followed a gladiator named Spartacus and nearly brought Rome to its knees. This isn't execution. Execution would have been mercy. This is a performance. 6,000 people dying slowly, deliberately, positioned along the empire's most traveled road so everyone would see. So no one could forget. Resist Rome, and we won't just kill you. We'll make your death a monument to our power. But here's what should haunt you. This wasn't Rome's cruelest humiliation. It wasn't even in the top 10. What Rome did to individuals with precision, with planning, with legal justification. That's where the real horror lies. The civilization that gave us law, order, roads, aqueducts. The foundation of what we call civilization itself. They also built the most sophisticated machinery of public degradation the ancient world ever saw. And they documented it proudly, carefully, like engineers documenting a bridge. In this story, you'll meet 3 people Rome decided to destroy. Not their bodies. That would be too quick. Their humanity. And you'll discover why the empire believed this wasn't cruelty, but art. First, understand what Rome was. Not the Hollywood version, the real thing. 50 million people under Roman control. 3 continents. Britain to Mesopotamia. 400 amphitheaters built specifically for public spectacles. 1 empire maintained by relatively few legions. How do you control 50 million people without modern technology, without surveillance, without instant communication? Rome found an answer. Psychological warfare. And they perfected it. They didn't just build roads and aqueducts. They built a system. Legal frameworks defining who could be humiliated, how and why. Economic incentives. Humiliation was profitable. Vendors, performers, sponsors, all profited from public degradation. 4 centuries of conditioning Romans to see this as entertainment, as civic duty. And they documented everything. Legal codes, personal letters, histories. Roman intellectuals debated this. Cicero argued that public humiliation created social bonds through shared witnessing. Seneca, Stoic philosopher, tutor to emperors, wrote treatises on why seeing degradation made citizens more obedient. They weren't ashamed. They were proud of this innovation. You've met 3 souls trapped in Rome's machinery. Perpetua, a young mother who refused to deny her faith. Vercingetorix, a warrior king who united Gaul against Caesar. Sergianus, Rome's most powerful man before one afternoon destroyed everything. 3 people, 3 different crimes in Roman eyes, 1 shared fate, systematic, public, calculated humiliation designed to break them so completely that their destruction would echo for generations. What you're about to witness happened to real people, whose names survived 2,000 years. Their suffering was documented not as tragedy, but as policy success. If this moment moves you, if you believe these voices deserve to be heard, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that history's darkest truths matter more than easy entertainment. And if you think humanity is worth remembering, subscribe to Crimson Historians. We tell the stories that should never be forgotten. Stay with their stories. They deserve that much. Carthage, North Africa, 203 CE. Bibia Perpetua, age 22. Married, nursing a newborn son. Daughter of a wealthy Roman official. Everything to lose. She was Christian in 2003. That was treason. Not because of what Christians believed, but because they refused to perform a simple ritual. Burn incense to the emperor's image. 5 seconds. Acknowledgement of Roman authority. That's all. Perpetua was arrested with several other Christians. For months, authorities offered her the same deal. Perform the ritual. Go home to your baby. Refuse. And face the arena. We know what happened in that prison because Perpetua wrote it down. Her diary survived. one of the earliest pieces of Christian literature written by a woman. She describes her father visiting. He kissed her hands, called her daughter, then lady, trying every form of appeal. He said, "Have pity on my grey hairs. Have pity on your infant son, who cannot live without you." And she writes, "I grieved for my father, because he alone of all my family would not rejoice at my martyrdom. Guards brought her baby to the prison. Let her nurse him. Then took him away over and over. Each visit. Just perform the ritual. Hold your son forever. Each refusal. You're choosing death over your child. What kind of mother are you?" Roman sources describe what they did next. They didn't torture her physically. That would create sympathy. Instead, they broke her through her identity as a mother. The night before her execution, Perpetua wrote one final entry. She describes a vision of climbing a bronze ladder lined with swords, reaching paradise. Then she writes, "And I awoke. And I understood that I would not be fighting with beasts, but with the devil himself." She was wrong. She would be fighting with something worse than the devil. Rome's machinery of humiliation refined over centuries to break people in front of crowds. Gaul, modern France, 52 BCE, Beringix. His name meant great king of warriors, age 30, chief of the Avari tribe. The man who did the impossible, united dozens of GIC tribes against Rome. For the first time in decades, Rome faced a unified enemy in Gaul. Vercingetorix wasn't just brave. He was brilliant. Guerrilla tactics. Scorched earth. He studied Roman methods and used them against Julius Caesar himself. He almost won. At the Battle of Gergoia, he handed Caesar one of his worst defeats. For a moment, Gaul's independence seemed possible. Then came Alesia. Caesar surrounded Vercingetorix's army. Vercingetorix surrounded Caesar. 2 rings of siege works. Winner takes all. When starvation set in, Vercingetorix did something extraordinary. He rode out of the fortress alone in full ceremonial armor, and surrendered himself to Caesar to save his people. Caesar's own words describe it. The leader of the Gauls, having put on his most beautiful armor, and decorated his horse, rode through the Roman camp, and made a circuit around the tribunal where I was seated. Then stripping off his armor, he sat down at my feet, and remained motionless, until he was handed over to guards. Caesar promised Vercingetorix's warriors mercy, if their king surrendered. The warriors went free, Vercingetorix did not. Caesar kept him alive, not for negotiation, not for information, but something else. Because Caesar knew he would return to Rome someday for his triumph. And a triumph needed the right prop. Vercingetorix spent 6 years in Rome's Tully and prison underground darkness alone. Why did Caesar wait so long? The answer is in Roman strategic thinking. Anticipation amplifies impact. For 6 years, Romans heard stories of the GIC king in chains beneath the city. His legend grew. His upcoming humiliation became the most anticipated spectacle in Rome. In 46 BCE, Caesar finally scheduled his triumph. Vercingetorix would be the centerpiece. Not executed quickly, not imprisoned forever. Displayed, paraded, humiliated, then only at the end killed. The Romans had refined triumph processions over centuries. They knew exactly how to break a king in front of a crowd. March 7, 203 CE. Carthage Amphitheater. Games celebrating the emperor's birthday. Perpetual and Felicity, her fellow martyr, a slave, are brought into the arena dressed as priestesses of Ceres, a pagan goddess they rejected. The humiliation is immediate. Forced to wear the symbols of the religion they've been imprisoned for refusing. Even the crowd objects. The crowd accustomed to blood objects. The Roman historian noted the mob shouted against it, and they were brought out in simple tunics. Making them wear pagan robes was too cruel even for Romans used to watching executions. They release a wild cow into the arena. Not a lion. That would be too quick, too masculine, too honorable. A cow. Female animal for female victims. The symbolism is deliberate. The cow charges Perpetua, throws her into the air. She hits the ground hard. The source describes what happens next. She got up and seeing Felicity crushed, went to her and lifted her up. They stood together, even bleeding, even terrified. Perpetual's first instinct is to help her friend. Rome wanted to break her. Instead, she shows them something they don't have a protocol for. Love stronger than fear. The cow doesn't kill them fast enough. Roman protocol takes over. They're taken to the side gate, where a gladiator will finish them with a sword. A quick death. Except the gladiator is young, inexperienced. His first strike hits Perpetual in the ribs, but doesn't kill her. The source records that Pepita guided her sword to her throat herself. Even in death, she refuses to let Rome control her completely. 22 years old, a mother. Her diary ended with her vision of paradise. Her life ended guiding a sword to her own throat because a gladiator's hand was shaking too much to finish the job. September 46 BCE, the triumph of Julius Caesar, the most elaborate in Roman history. 3 Mai through Rome, past the Senate, through the Forum, ending at the Temple of Jupiter. Hundreds of thousands watching, the largest crowd ever assembled in the ancient world. The procession moves in order. First, displays of captured Greek wealth. Second, floats showing Caesar's victories. Third, sacred animals for sacrifice. Fourth, the prisoners. Vercingetorix walks in chains, not the dignified warrior who surrendered 6 years ago. His head is shaved. Mark of a slave. He wears rags. But sources note something disturbing. Despite 6 years in darkness, despite deliberate starvation to weaken him, he walks upright. Here's where Rome's sophistication shows. They don't just parade him once through the city. They stop the procession at key locations. The Senate, where he can see Rome's power. The Forum, where thousands can mock him up close. Caesar's platform, where he stands while Caesar gives a speech about him in front of him. This man united Gaul against Rome. This man nearly defeated our legions. But he stands here now broken because no one can resist Rome's destiny. Joix has to listen to his own defeat being celebrated. Has to hear his people's liberation described as rebellion. Has to stand silent while Caesar rewrites their story. The procession reaches its end point. For most prisoners, this means return to cells. For the principal captive of a triumph, it means something else. He's led to the Tullianum, the same prison where he spent 6 years down stone steps into the underground chamber. The Tullianum isn't for imprisonment. It's an execution chamber. Strangulation, slow, manual. While crowds above celebrate Caesar's victory at the Temple of Jupiter, Roman protocol requires the triumph's principal captive to die during the celebration feast. So while Caesar toasts his victory, Beringix dies in darkness. His death timed to coincide with the evening's entertainment. No burial, no monument, no record of his body's disposal. The king who united Gaul dies as Rome's trophy. Used, displayed, discarded. If stories like this are left to die in forgotten archives, history itself becomes the next casualty. These weren't nameless victims. They were people subscribed to keep their memory alive. Because what Rome did to them should never happen in silence. Perpetual's diary became one of Christianity's most powerful early texts. Augustine of Hippo cited it. Medieval artists painted her. But here's what we often forget. Her infant son. Roman sources don't record what happened to him. A nursing infant whose mother chose faith over his life. Did he survive? Was he raised knowing his mother chose death? Did he grow up Christian, inspired by her sacrifice? Or did he curse her name? We don't know. And the absence, that silence is its own kind of horror. But Perpetua's death didn't stop Christianity. It accelerated it. Within a century, Christianity was Rome's state religion. The arena where she died became a church. The empire that killed her adopted her faith. Rome's machinery of humiliation had an unintended consequence. It created martyrs, and martyrs are more dangerous than rebels. Verzandix disappeared from Roman records after his execution. His name wasn't spoken, no monuments, no legacy. That was Rome's intention. Total erasure. For 800 years, he was a footnote, an enemy defeated, a warning to others. Then in the 1800s, France was occupied by foreign powers. Historians rediscovered Vercingetorix's story. Suddenly, he wasn't a defeated rebel. He was a symbol. The man who unified France against invaders. Napoleon III erected a massive statue of Vercingetorix at Alicia, the site of his surrender. The inscription reads, Gaul united forming a single nation animated by a common spirit, can defy the universe. Rome tried to erase him. Instead, they created a legend that outlasted their empire. But the man, The actual person who rode out of Elysia to save his warriors, he died in darkness, strangled in a hole. His death choreographed to entertain Roman elites. No amount of later glory changes that. These weren't isolated incidents. This was policy repeated thousands of times across 6 centuries. Estimated 100 individuals subjected to systematic public humiliation. Millions of witnesses conditioned to see degradation as entertainment. Infrastructure that outlasted the empire itself. Amphitheaters still standing today. How do you reconcile Rome's gifts? Law, architecture, engineering, literature, with what they did to human dignity? You don't. You hold both truths. Rome was brilliant and brutal. They built the foundations of Western civilization, and they perfected the machinery of public degradation. Both things are true. That's what makes it so disturbing. Here's what should haunt us. Rome's methods didn't disappear. They evolved. Medieval public executions, same logic, different theology. Colonial powers turned triumph processions into victory parades. The modern era moved public shaming from streets to screens. Rome understood something we're still grappling with. Public humiliation is more effective than private punishment. The presence of witnesses doesn't just add to suffering, it multiplies it exponentially. Contemporary trauma psychology confirms what Rome knew 2,000 years ago. Public degradation creates deeper trauma than physical pain alone. Forced performance increases psychological damage through complicity. Witness participation creates collective guilt that reinforces social control. Rome didn't invent cruelty. They systematized it. They turned degradation into infrastructure. They made humiliation efficient. Perpetual walked into that arena carrying 2 unbearable weights. Her love for her son and her love for her faith. Rome forced her to choose, and she chose knowing the cost. Was she brave? Yes. Was she right? That's not for me to judge. But she was human, torn between 2 loves, both real, both demanding everything. Vercingetorix surrendered himself to save his warriors. Noble. Absolutely. But it didn't matter to Rome. They didn't see nobility. They saw a prop for Caesar's career advancement. 6 years of waiting to be humiliated, then strangled in darkness. He became a symbol to later generations. But the man himself, he just wanted his people free. Perpeta and Vercingetorix are remembered because their stories survived. But think about all the others. The slaves on the Iron Way. The prisoners in forgotten triumphs. The people condemned to beasts whose names were never recorded. They died without memorials, without stories. Their humiliation served its purpose. Then they were forgotten. And that intentional eraser might be Rome's cruelest act. You might be thinking, this is ancient history. We're more civilized now. Are we? We've replaced amphitheaters with algorithms, but the mechanism is the same. Public shaming as entertainment, as control, as correction. We don't chain people in streets anymore. We just make their worst moments go viral. We don't parade prisoners through cities. We just live stream arrests. We don't force people into arenas. We just create platforms where humiliation is monetized. Rome had 400 amphitheaters. We have billions of screens. Rome reached millions. We reached billions. The technology changed. The psychology didn't. So what do we do with this? We remember. Not to glorify suffering, but to recognize it. We remember Perpetual guiding the sword to her own throat. We remember Vers walking upright after 6 years in darkness. We remember that systems of humiliation don't need monsters to run them, just ordinary people conditioned to accept degradation as normal. Rome fell 1500 years ago, but the crosses on the Iron Way stood for decades as warnings. The amphitheaters still stand as monuments, and the names Perpetual, Vercingetorix, and thousands more. They survive in fragments of text, carved stone, buried documents. They endured not the humiliation Rome inflicted, but their humanity. Despite everything designed to destroy it, some spark of dignity survived long enough to be written down, passed forward, remembered. And maybe that's the point. Rome had unlimited power, sophisticated systems, centuries of refinement. But they couldn't completely erase the people they tried to break, because someone wrote it down. Someone preserved the stories. Someone refused to let the erasure be complete. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Of the universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it, and death is but a release from the impressions of the senses. Rome tried to control even death itself, to make it public, degrading, instructive. But they couldn't control memory. That belonged to anyone who chose to remember. You've just witnessed one of history's darkest truths. Not ancient trivia. It's a mirror showing us what happens when degradation becomes policy. When cruelty becomes culture. When systems strip humanity in the name of order. If you believe memory is worth keeping, if you believe these names deserve to echo one moment longer, subscribe to Crimson Historians. We tell the stories that should never be forgotten, especially the ones that make us uncomfortable. Perpetua, age 22, Mother Vercingetorix, age 30, king, and 6,000 slaves whose names we'll never know. By remembering them, you've done what centuries of empire could not. You gave them back their humanity. If only for these